Yeah. Oh.
Hi guys, what is up, what is good, what is Gucci? It is your girl Paige Christie here, bringing you yet another video. Now, if you guys remember last week, I told you guys that I was going to be tackling the trans debate on TikTok. Now, there are numerous different trans debates taking place currently on TikTok, but the one it is that I would like to focus specifically on is the idea of trans women being able to have periods. Now, this discussion on TikTok has been extremely divisive. There have been cisgender people who have been in their feelings. There have been transgendered people who have been in their feelings. There have been people who are outside the confines of the gender binary who have also been upset and in their feelings about this conversation, because nobody seems to, from what I can see, come to like a general consensus of what the truth is. And at the end of the day, for me personally, I'm a truth seeker above anything else. But before we get started in today's video, I feel like I need to do some housekeeping. So with that being said, as a disclaimer, not that it needs to be said, but I feel like there are some crazy people out here in these streets. Okay, some of y'all be crazy out here, and I need to make this clear. Trans women are women and trans men are men and should be respected as such. And people who do not subscribe to the binary construct are also to be respected. We need to respect each other, each other's pronouns, and do our best as individuals to move and navigate through the space with love and with attention. I say this because a couple of weeks ago, Jeffree Star ended up saying some stuff in a podcast, basically just like not respecting people's pronouns and saying that it had all gotten a bit too much. And that ended up upsetting quite a lot of his own fan base, because obviously Jeffree Star has kind of never subscribed to the binary of what a man should look like or what a woman should look like. They kind of just are their own person.
How are you a they? What the fuck does that mean?
So because of that, I kind of feel like within the beauty space at this very moment in time, there could be a case where individuals feel like it's acceptable to be disrespectful to other people's pronouns, and this is not the space. And if I see anything in my comments that is indicative of anybody trying to be transphobic or anything close, it will be shut down. Keep the conversations cute, okay, before we need to knock them butt. So with that being said, let's take a look at the trans debate on TikTok surrounding trans women and their periods. Now, I don't know what the situation is for everybody else's For You page, but my For You page is just full of the trans debate. Whether it's cisgender individuals not wanting to be referred to as cisgender, or if it's about the trans people and their periods, or if it's the conversation to do with chest feeding or being called a womb carrier or a birthing person, there seems to be like a major divide between the cisgender community and the transgender community. But most specifically, the biggest divider is that I've seen, especially on TikTok, is between cisgender women and the trans women within the community, with many cis women feeling as if they are being erased. Now, this was spearheaded by one particular conversation, and that's a conversation of, do trans women have periods?
I can tell you right now, my period I experience every month is very real, very valid, and very painful.
Perhaps so. Perhaps not.
C-A-P.
Now, this conversation had been taking place all throughout 2022 on TikTok. However, the one story that ended up catapulting this entire thing into mainstream media and mainstream social media is a video of a trans woman experiencing period cramps. Take a look.
Why? Stop. Why is this thing not hot? I swear to God, if anyone says welcome to womanhood, I'm gonna lose.
Now, this video got into the hands of the libs of TikTok, and because of that, all of a sudden, everybody was involved in this massive discussion. And there was also a distinct divide between trans individuals who were supporting the narrative that trans women can experience periods, as well as trans people and trans women who are saying that trans women cannot have periods.
Do you get your period as a trans girl? Yes, I bleed every single month. Like, I don't understand why people don't get that. I don't understand why this is even a question, but no, I don't get my period.
Nope, trans women don't get periods. We don't have uteruses and there's no technology.
If you asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said yes. I would say yes, I do get a period as a transgender woman. But now that I've matured more and my brain has developed more, I've realized the answer is simply no. No, trans women do not get periods, babe.
To shortly answer your question, no, I do not get my period because I do not have a uterus.
Now, originally, when I first heard the idea of trans women having periods, my first thought was, well, maybe, you know, with hormone replacement therapy, it could just be a situation where a trans person is feeling PMS, which is something that I think is more than reasonable. I mean, the human body is amazing, and we've all heard of sympathy pains, especially when it comes to things like labor and stuff like that. Having the same sympathy cravings as an individual who is pregnant. And I mean, even for me, myself, in my own personal life, not the first time I was pregnant, but the second time with my son, I ended up having tremendous Braxton Hicks to the point I thought that I was in active labor. And I took myself to my hospital, my local hospital. And if you guys remember, okay, on my Instagram, you will find out that I actually was just pissing myself all day. I called family members 200 miles away from where I live because they were going to be at my home birth. I delivered at home, right? They were traveling 200 miles to watch me piss myself all day. And that's exactly what took place.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Just contractions are still really, really far apart.
Yeah. You're doing a really good job,
Super
Avery.
bread. Oh my God, Jesus Christ.
Is he pushing down?
Yeah. Turns out that my waters haven't broken. I've just been pissing myself. So, don't quite really know what to tell you. Basically, I have absolutely no bladder control. And, yeah, slightly embarrassing. They've given me some pads. So the human body is amazing. Like, the fact that I thought that I was in active labor when I've been through a natural active labor already once before lets you know that the body can do things and contract and contort in ways that are wild. And it's magnificent, really. And I thought it was that, like, you know, when I went into the hospital and sat next to a woman who was visibly pregnant and asked her how many months she was, she turned around and told me that she was having a phantom pregnancy. These things can happen, and it is all a part of the wild and unique ride of being a human being. But when it comes down to my Braxton Hicks, I was feeling like it was labor. It was giving me that sensation, but the reality is that it was my hormones getting ready for the birthing period, and it just simply wasn't that. However, despite the fact that our bodies have the ability to do crazy things, there are still individuals who believe that trans women can have legitimate periods. And I was just wildly confused by that, because in order to have a period, you need to have a uterus. So before we get into my thoughts on the whole entire situation, let's take a look at what a period really is. So a period is essentially the colloquial term for what we call the menstrual cycle. And I feel like a majority of the confusion surrounding the trans woman period versus the cis woman period is just the word period. Because I think that most people would agree that if you were to ask a trans individual if they had a menstrual cycle, they would probably say no. But the word period is kind of just used as an umbrella term that encompasses everything that comes alongside with menstruation. Well, at least that's how it's being used now in the modern day. And I also think that when it comes to the English language, we think of period as an end of sentence, period as a length of time. If we were to say that somebody was wearing period dress or period costume, we would say that that was from a specific time period. And this has also been echoed by members of the trans community on TikTok, where they talk about a period of time that can be similar to what a cis woman would experience with a menstrual cycle.
The answer to that is yes. No, we do not have a menstruation cycle where we shed our uterine lining, because obviously no uterus. Keep up with me. Stick with me. But our hormonal balances do have periods of time where they spike and decrease, creating symptoms very similar to a menstruation period.
But that's just a misunderstanding in terms of terminology. So let's get into what a period is. Whilst a period does include a change in production of hormones, hormones only play a small part in the menstrual cycle as a whole. By necessity, a period requires a physical change in the uterus as well. The shedding of your uterine lining or endometrium is the function that typically comes when pregnancy has not been achieved, aka your ovaries have a mature egg that has descended down the fallopian tube and has been unable to be successfully fertilized by sperm. Following that, menstruation occurs. This is triggered by the falling levels of the hormone progesterone in the absence of pregnancy. This causes the inflammatory mediators to release, which in turn causes the endometrium to break down and a period to commence. The inflammatory mediators causes the uterus to contract, and the contraction of the uterus further constricts the blood supply to the endometrium, which then continues to break down and die. The uterine contractions then continue to squeeze out the dead endometrium tissue out of the vaginal canal, and this is what causes the feeling and sensation that we know as period cramps. It's our body's way of being aware of the contractions of the muscles of the uterus that has been caused by the release of the inflammatory mediators in the uterus. Now, this can also be a contributing factor to other symptoms that we associate with the menstruation period, such as nausea, headaches, bloating, etc., etc. However, nobody's periods are the same, and period cramps aren't indicative of menstruation. In fact, a study done on cis women showed that 15.9% of women had never experienced menstrual pain, and that
41%
of women didn't experience menstrual pain with every period. But the variation of period symptoms are so wide and vast that it can vary from person to person, or even period to period, depending on cycle. Sometimes you can experience a lot of cramping with a period, and another month you can experience barely anything at all. The only single one consistency is menstruation, aka the shedding of the uterine lining, aka bleeding. The same study discussed earlier showed that 83.7% of people showed symptoms associated with menstruation, and if we look at this table of symptoms that are, to say the least, variable, it also shows that the same test with cis menstruating women, that 16.3% showed absolutely no symptoms at all. Now, why is this important? Well, because period symptoms aren't what make a period. Menstruation is. The blood, the shedding of your uterine lining, and the confusion surrounding this subject of our reproductive organs is detrimental to anybody who menstruates, to all of us, trans men included. And on TikTok, I've seen the argument that, like, well, the language needs to change. And I'm like, no, the language doesn't need to change. The language just needs to be distinct. Period refers to the colloquial term in English that we use to describe the menstruation period, or the umbrella term for a menstrual cycle. And in order to have a period, you must shed your endometrium, aka bleed. Period symptoms is not a period. And PMS is also not a period. And period isn't relative to a period of time. A period isn't classified by its symptoms, but rather its mechanical function. So in turn, bleeding is not a symptom of a period. Bleeding is the period. Now, the craziest part of this TikTok controversy is the amount of trans women who are continuously being asked all across TikTok if they have a period. And this makes me understand that essentially people just don't understand our bodily functions or the reproductive functions of people who menstruate, or just the basics of our reproductive health in general.
Just a PSA to all my fellow trans girls out there on estrogen. We do in fact get periods.
Hey dolls, so I get a lot of these questions, whether they're satire or not. So I'm gonna tell you guys my first period story. C-A-P.
Trans women get periods. Let's talk about it.
Clinicians have implored people to keep an eye on their menstrual health, their cycle, its frequency, the strength of their flow, the symptoms that come alongside the menstruation, to explore the abnormalities in their period, because it's very difficult to diagnose an individual who menstruates if they are unable to identify what is normal for that person's menstruation period. This kind of knowledge, and I guess medical history, if you will, is exactly what helps clinicians be able to identify any problems with your reproductive system earlier on, as in sooner rather than later. Because as individuals, we are able to pinpoint, this is not normal for me. Because again, the human body is strange and weird and everybody functions differently. Most women have a 28-day cycle that leaves them bleeding for 7 days. I, on the other hand, have a 31-day cycle that leaves me bleeding for 3 to 4. I guess I'm lucky like that. However, if I started bleeding for 10 days at a time over 40 days in a cycle, that would be a moment for me to go and speak to my GP and ask them, is everything okay? Don't know, are we good? Hence why the perpetuation of this misinformation is detrimental to anybody who menstruates. I mean, how the hell are you supposed to identify abnormalities with your own period if you can't even work out the basic functions of the things it is that you need inside for a period to even function? And I kind of feel like the way that this discussion is being steered on TikTok is almost as if, like, you know, you're not woman enough if you don't have these features. The fact is that menstruation doesn't make you any more or any less of a woman. I stopped menstruating for like a whole year, an entire year, because I wasn't treating my body correctly. And there were a lot of health factors that contributed to my own reproductive health that I needed to deal with. But in that period, pun intended, of time that I wasn't menstruating, it didn't make me any less of a woman, or at least I didn't feel any less of a woman. However, whilst there may be quite a bit of period stigma, there is quite a privilege to individuals who are able to menstruate and deal with their menstruation. So this is where we kind of come into the place of discussing period poverty.
Period poverty. What exactly is that?
It's basically an extension of poverty, but for the millions of American women that are living either in poverty or on the brink of it, you know, getting your period every single month is not just an inconvenience like it might be to the rest of us. It's sort of a crisis. You have to, if you only have $5 in your pocket, that means choosing between eating and buying pads and tampons.
I've seen myself for like 4 days using soaks and tissue, and then like sometimes when I'm on them I need to wear just like an old pair of trousers or something, because if I'm going to leak then it'll go in that. I've seen myself wearing white denims and I've been actually saturated in blood. It's horrible. It's horrible. Knowing that you're bleeding and there's nothing you can do about it.
Every month they are placed in a crisis situation. You shouldn't have to decide between a pad and having lunch.
I've had some girls that have come in that say that they have to stay off school because they don't have pads or tampons and things, and they don't feel clean enough and things like that, so they just stay at home rather than going to school or out with their friends.
Have you had situations where you've sent your daughter off to school without proper sanitary products?
Never. I would never ever put her through that. It's humiliating enough for myself not to have products, but as I said, I would give up meals for me so she could have at least some protection.
I come here to Thompson Square Park and I do my cleanup in the sink. I get a big cup like the big McDonald's cup, and I fill it up with water. I'll straddle it this way. You're able to pour water and use the soap and basically wash over the toilet and get a really good cleansing at the same time. That's the best way to actually get your feminine hygiene accomplished.
We have a huge problem over here and around the world, so not just in Western society but also third world countries, etc., where people don't have the ability to access menstruation products. So we're talking pads, tampons, menstruation cups and things of the like. I mean, these items are extremely taxed by our government, and for most countries, they are not free. I mean, shit, I remember a time in my life where I was literally stealing toilet paper from my work to go and deal with my lady area because I didn't have anything else to soak up the blood. And I was on minimum wage at the time, so I can't imagine what it's like for individuals who don't even have access to the kind of money it was that I had access to. Now, this topic has further aggravated the cisgender woman community on TikTok by an individual called Jeffrey Marsh. Now, girl, I am not a big fan of Jeffrey Marsh. I don't like that person, and they're a person that I'm going to be keeping my beady eye on. If you want a video about them in the future, I can for sure do it, but I will tread extremely lightly and try my best to keep my emotions in check. However, if you don't know who Jeffrey Marsh is, they are a trans activist, as well as a TikToker, ex-Viner, and a bunch of other stuff. They've also wrote books and all of those cool things, but they are mostly known for their activism on TikTok with approximately 3 million followers. Well, Jeffrey Marsh found themselves at the center of controversy where they did an advert for a tampon company. Now, Jeffrey Marsh basically goes by they, them pronouns and self-identifies as non-binary. But for the most part, Jeffrey Marsh doesn't have a vagina. And a lot of people were upset with the fact that Jeffrey Marsh, a person who doesn't have a vagina, was a part of an ad campaign to do with menstruation. So they don't have a vagina, they don't menstruate, and they were a brand ambassador for a tampon company. This got everyone upset, but this is what Jeffrey Marsh had to say. Take a look.
I did a brand deal for tampons. This was 2020, and this is me dancing around. That's a major national brand paid me to make this ad for them on social media. And I wanted to say 2 things about it. I made the video for 2 reasons. So that women would feel less stigmatized, so that people who menstruate would feel less stigmatized, because to cis men, let's face it, menstruation is seen as gross, disgusting, a joke. And as someone who does not menstruate, I'm non-binary, I don't menstruate, I wanted to help end that stigma if I could. And I also, you notice I don't do a lot of brand deals. I did this one because I wanted trans people to feel better and not have, trans men who menstruate and non-binary people who menstruate to not feel double stigmatized around menstruation and being trans. And then the hate came for me. And I want to say something to the ladies of Twitter especially. We should be working together to undermine the patriarchy. We are not your enemy. The more you fight for your box, the more you are fighting for a hierarchy of one box over the other. We don't want to take womanhood from you. We don't want to tell you what to do. But I know as a non-binary person, the more you police your gender role, the more you are policing the idea that one gender role is the best. It gives me a lot of emotion to talk about because I am a feminist and I will keep fighting for your rights, even if you hate me to my core, because women are not second-class citizens. If I could have anything, it would be that people just don't hate themselves as much. And I'll continue to do that no matter what happens from here. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Now, this one was a weird one for me because Jeffrey Marsh speaks about visibility and the fact that it was all about them doing this so that other trans individuals can be seen. But this isn't a trans individual who can menstruate. This is a non-binary individual who doesn't even have the facilities to do these things. So even if the intention was there, the execution was poor and actually left a lot of people who do menstruate, cis women, trans men alike, feeling unseen. So I kind of understood to a certain degree how so many other people were feeling about this. Anyway, with that being said, let's get straight into the conclusion. So to conclude, I respect the idea of being gender inclusive as much as we possibly can be. I'm recognizing trans women and the lack of information surrounding the effects of HRT on the body and how it can affect the body. This discussion needs to happen. And with it being the early days of gender-affirming surgeries and hormone replacement therapies, I also understand how anecdotal information can be a vital part of learning and understanding all of these new areas we're stepping into. But we need to live in a reality of, whilst trans women are women and should be respected as such and should have the liberty to navigate the world as one, we need to respect the biology that lives in us all and makes us all fantastically unique individuals. I am a woman, but I'm also a Black woman, and that intersectional part of my own biology is a fundamental piece that separates me away from my European peers, with my own ethnicity-based health concerns. For instance, a white woman will never, likely, ever have to worry about sickle cell, as that's something that tends to live inside people of African descent. So when we don't respect the biology of the human body, we are doing a disservice to individuals who are seeking medical and clinical information specifically for them and specific to them and the demographic they represent. This also assists the transphobic narrative of women are being erased, when in reality, when it comes to human biology, every person should be respected. For instance, trans women will never know what it's like to hide your period products, to bleed on your bed sheets, to bleach your underwear in order to try and get rid of stains, to cough or sneeze too hard and leave a bloody explosion in those knickers, to factor in expensive menstruation products into your monthly bills, to worry about PCOS, endometriosis, and cervical cancer. But to the same effect, I, as a cisgender woman, will never understand what it's like to go through hormone replacement therapy, to deal with body dysphoria, to have to take a pill or inject a synthetic hormone every week/every day, to see my body changing in a way that doesn't reflect who I am, to start period blockers or hormone blockers and the hormonal changes that come with that. Spend hundreds upon thousands of pounds on gender affirming surgery. I will never know that. but I will. And I can respect that. We are all uniquely different, and that's what makes us beautiful. So if you menstruate, or if you don't, there's no shame in that. And that's on period. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed today's video. It took a little bit of extra research that I wanted to do, but I wanted to make sure that whatever it was that I was saying was concise and clear, and hopefully you guys could understand where it is that I'm coming from. I'm not out here to attack or bash anyone, and neither the fuck should you guys, okay? I don't want to see a single person out here being transphobic. If I see it, it's gone on site, and I implore all of my moderators on this channel to do the same. With that being said, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to my members, my patrons, as well as my Twitch family. I really appreciate you guys, and thank you so much for sticking beside me. I'ma stick beside them. And with that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing day or evening, whatever the hell it is that you guys are doing. And until next time, I love you, bitch. Period. Bye. I don't know what that was. Bye.